this kind of fervor, this kind of anti-Vietnam War fervor versus those who were anti-communist will pick up pace, and we'll see these groups of people actually kind of coalesce around two different names. We're going to see them called, in one part, the Hawks, and the other part, the Doves. And we're going to see this kind of division in our society be reflected in the way in which the media is also divided against the government. And the example I'm going to show you here about why this all happens and how these groups kind of emerge is going to be something called the Tet Offensive, which happens in 1968 in terms of whether or not we should support our government during a time of war. And what I want to show you here is that as these protests continue and continue and continue, by 1968 it looks like our country is split pretty much in half. There are people who want peace, the Doves, these are the people who are anti-Vietnam, and the people who want us to continue to fight, the Hawks, who say we must be anti-communist. And if you look at this map about whether is it a mistake sending troops to Vietnam, it's not until August of 1968 that number crosses over 50%. So we still have 50% of Americans or more here in red who say we should be fighting this war. And then we have another 50% by 1968 saying that we should not fight this war. And of course, as the years go on, that percentage will increase, right? But it's not until 1968 that we really see our country divided right in half for it, half against it. The top in the red, the Hawks, half Doves. And in 1968 is a pivotal year for this, where we're going to see more and more Doves and fewer Hawks, in part because of something called the Tet Offensive. Now, remember that President Johnson has been on the news every night telling us that the Vietnamese are just about going to quit. They're just about going to fail. And right during the Vietnamese New Year, which is a time called Tet, which is right around the beginning of the year, we see a series of massive attacks by the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army together at almost every major American base in southern cities. So each one of these little dots that I have,
You'll need to unlock your iPhone first.
each of these little dots that I have here indicates a major battle that took place. And all of these battles, which were launched by the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army together, they were launched at the same time, one night during Tet, during the New Year. And over the period of the next several days, these attacks erupted all across the country. Now, if you're an enemy who's on the verge of defeat, if you're an enemy who's almost lost, you don't attack every major American military base in the span of 2 or 3 evenings. You just don't do it. In fact, the Viet Cong even capture the South Vietnamese city of Saigon, which is right here, for a short while. They actually capture the whole thing. They even capture our embassy in Saigon, which is supposed to be the most protected place in all of South Vietnam for Americans. Now, we end up winning this battle. We end up winning the Tet Offensive. We push the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong back in every single instance. Every single one of these red dots where they attack, they will lose. America will win with our South Vietnamese allies, but it's still a political loss. It's a political loss because the credibility gap is virtually proved. Right? I mean, come on, Johnson. Seriously? How can you keep telling us that these people are losing when they're able to attack us like this? I mean, the bottom line is it looks like this war is going to drag on for years, and it does. It drags on for another 5 years. Americans begin to really doubt just how much they can win. And the number of Doves will increase from that point in 1968 on. And President Johnson's popularity is going to continue to plummet. Take a look at this chart. Here's President Johnson's popularity. So right when he starts Great Society initiatives, for example, he's got popularity way up in the high 70s. That's ginormous. And that popularity stays above 50% all the way through 1966. But look what happens here, the Tet Offensive. It's a low point. 35% of Americans think President Johnson's doing a good job. Almost 65% say he's not. He's not doing a good job. LBJ realizes that there's no way the Democrats are going to have a chance at winning the next election with him in charge because nobody likes him. So he announced on television that he is not going to run for office in 1968 because he knows Americans are upset with the way he's running the war. I mean, realize that 1968 is a time of terrible controversy and crisis, right? This is the same year that Martin Luther King's assassin James Earl Ray's acting, right? I mean, so we've got assassinations, we've got the Tet Offensive, we've got the credibility cap, we've got 50% of Americans being doves, 50% being hawks. America is a mess. And so what's going to happen as Johnson's second term comes to a close? What's that going to look like in 1968?